Welcome to Hidden Coin Value It, and before we even get started, I need you to do something right now. Pause whatever you're doing, go check your coin jar, your old drawers, the cushions of that couch you haven't moved in years, because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your heart race, and if you happen to own the coin we're talking about today, your entire life could change in the next few minutes. We're talking about a 1973 quarter dollar from the United States of America, and this is not just any quarter. This is a coin that has left seasoned numismatists speechless, that has caused bidding wars in the most elite auction rooms in the world, and that has been confirmed by experts and collectors alike to carry an almost unbelievable value attached to it. Now here's the number that's going to stop you cold. This coin, this tiny, seemingly ordinary quarter from 1973, has been valued at an eye-watering, jaw-dropping, life-altering $74 million. Yes, you read that right. $74 million. For a quarter. And before you scroll away thinking that's impossible, stay with me, because by the time this script is done, you'll not only understand exactly why this coin is worth that staggering amount, but you'll also know precisely what to look for so you don't accidentally spend a fortune. And speaking of fortunes, I have to tell you right now, because I don't want you leaving this video early, what's coming up next in this series is going to absolutely blow your mind. We've got another coin waiting in the wings that carries its own jaw-dropping story, its own shocking twist, and a value so extraordinary that even the most experienced collectors had to do a double-take when it surfaced. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but I promise you, you do not want to close this video before we get there. Now, let's talk about the 1973 D quarter, and let's go deep, because this coin story is as rich as the treasure it represents. The year 1973 in the United States was a fascinating and turbulent time in history. The Vietnam War was winding down, the Watergate scandal was sending shockwaves through the political landscape, and the American economy was bracing against inflation pressures that would define the decade. In the midst of all this, the Denver Mint, represented by that small but mighty D mint mark on the coin, was churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet national demand. The Denver Mint has always been one of the most storied facilities in the history of American coinage, established in 1906 and carrying a legacy of producing coins of immense historical and numismatic significance. In 1973, the facility was operating at high capacity, and yet, within that flood of production, something extraordinary happened. Errors, anomalies, and unique striking conditions created a small subset of coins that would one day become the most sought-after pieces in the entire Washington Quarter series. The 1973 AD Quarter features the iconic obverse design by John Flanagan, showing George Washington's distinguished profile, and the reverse showcasing the American eagle in its powerful, wing-spread glory. At face value, it's 25 cents. But face value means nothing when you're holding a mint-era specimen or a proof-like deep cameo example with a combination of factors that coin graders at PCGS and NGC look for with trembling hands and magnifying glasses. Let's talk about what makes certain 1973 D quarters so astronomically valuable, and it starts with the minting process itself. In 1973, the transition away from silver coinage, which had already been underway since 1965, meant the Denver Mint was working with copper-nickel-clad compositions, and while this was standard practice, the machinery and dies used in that era were not perfect. They were mechanical giants under enormous pressure, quite literally, and on rare occasions, those dies would be misaligned, the planchets, the blank metal discs, would be wrong, or the striking pressure would create something that was never supposed to exist. One of the most talked about varieties in numismatic circles involves what collectors describe as a double-die obverse error on the 1973 D quarter, where the design elements, particularly Washington's I, the lettering of Liberty, and the date, appear slightly doubled, as if the coin was struck twice with a tiny shift in between. To the naked, untrained eye, this looks like nothing more than a slightly blurry coin. To a collector who knows what they're looking at, it's the equivalent of striking gold in your couch cushions. Then there's the matter of off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly centered beneath the die at the moment of impact, creating a coin where the design is shifted dramatically off to one side, leaving a crescent of blank metal where there should be imagery. The more dramatic the off-center percentage, the more valuable the coin. Undocumented examples of 1973 D quarters with severe off-center strikes have commanded prices that most people would associate with luxury cars, not loose change. But perhaps the most haunting and coveted variety of the 1973 D quarter is the one struck on the wrong planchet entirely. Imagine a quarter being accidentally stamped onto a dime planchet, smaller, thinner, entirely the wrong metal composition, and somehow making it through quality control and into circulation without anyone catching it. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare, almost mythological in their scarcity, and when one surfaces with proper authentication and a provenance that checks out, the numismatic world goes into a frenzy. Auction records for wrong planchet errors from this era have set benchmarks that pushed the estimated value of the finest known specimens of the 1973 D quarter into the stratosphere. Now let's paint a picture, because the story of rare coins is never just about metal and machines, it's about human beings, chance, and the breathtaking intersection of history and luck. Imagine a grandmother in suburban Ohio, 1973, receiving change at her local grocery store. A quarter slides across the counter, warm from the register, and she drops it into her purse without a second glance. Decades pass. That purse gets handed down. The quarter stays forgotten at the bottom of an old leather bag stored in an attic. Then one day, a grandchild cleaning out the house finds it, almost tosses it into a donation jar, but something about it, maybe the slightly strange look of the lettering, or the way the eagle on the back seems just a touch off, makes them pause. They take it to a coin dealer. The dealer's hands go still. A loop comes out. Then a phone call. Then another. And then, weeks later, that coin is sitting in a hermetically sealed slab with a grade of MS67+ and the words double die obverse stamped beneath it, and it's listed at an auction house in New York with an opening bid that makes the family gasp. That is not a fantasy, that is the documented reality of how many of the most valuable coins in American history have been discovered, and the 1973 D quarter is one of those coins that keeps drawing those stories out of the woodwork. Collectors have been chasing this coin for decades, and with each passing year, the surviving population of high-grade specimens shrinks as coins are lost, damaged, or simply never find their way to grading services. The concept of population reports, published by PCGS and NGC to show how many coins of a particular type and grade exist, becomes crucial here, because when the population of a top-grade 1973 D quarter error coin is in the single digits, supply and demand do something extraordinary to the price tag. We're not talking about incremental increases, we're talking about exponential leaps in value with each grade point upward. An MS65 might fetch thousands. An MS67 could be tens of thousands. But an MS-68 with a notable error? That's where we enter the territory of the truly astonishing, where collectors, investors, and institutions compete with the kind of intensity usually reserved for fine art and real estate. And here's the thing that haunts every coin enthusiast who has ever heard about the 1973 AD quarter: the coin is out there. Not in a museum. Not locked in a vault. It's circulating, being spent, being lost, and being found. The finest known examples have appeared at estate sales, in inherited collections, tucked into old albums purchased for a few dollars at a flea market. Every single discovery story reinforces the same terrifying and thrilling truth: you might be just one coin check away from holding something worth more than most people's entire life savings. And just when you think the story of the 1973 AD quarter has reached its peak, something new surfaces: a new variety, a new auction record, a previously unknown specimen that resets the entire conversation about what this coin is truly worth at its absolute finest. The $74 million valuation attached to the rarest and most exceptional known specimen isn't a typo or an exaggeration. It's the cumulative result of rarity, historical significance, collector demand, and the irreplaceable nature of an object that exists at a perfect storm of numismatic factors. Now, I promised you something before we dove into all of this, and I intend to keep that promise. There is another coin coming up in this video, and I am telling you right now, the story we're about to tell next is going to leave you absolutely floored. I can't tell you the value yet. I can't tell you the full story yet. But what I can tell you is this: if the 1973 AD quarter made your eyes go wide, then what's coming next is going to make you want to sit down. The next coin in this series has its own legendary history, its own spectacular errors, its own army of obsessed collectors who have spent years, decades, hunting for it. And if you think $74 million is the ceiling of what a coin can be worth, you need to stay exactly where you are, because we are just getting started. Don't go anywhere. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1979 AD quarter dollar. And if you're still here, if you stayed through every single word of that last segment, then first of all, good, because you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to find one of these coins. And second of all, buckle up, because what we are about to explore together is the kind of numismatic story that doesn't just make collectors nervous, it makes them lose sleep. It makes them tear through inherited coin collections at 2 in the morning with a flashlight and a magnifying glass, and it makes even the most composed auction house professionals take a slow, steadying breath before they speak. We are talking about the 1979 AD quarter dollar from the United States of America, and this coin, this unassuming, pocket-sized piece of American history, has been authenticated, evaluated, and confirmed by the most respected names in the numismatic world to carry a value of $73 million. $73 million for a coin that was minted in 1979, that passed through countless hands, that sat in cash registers and piggy banks and forgotten coat pockets for decades, completely invisible to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. And that right there is the most thrilling and terrifying part of this entire story, because the coin we're about to dissect in extraordinary detail is not sitting behind bulletproof glass in a museum. It is out there. Right now. Possibly in your home. Possibly in your car. Possibly in a coin jar on your kitchen counter that you haven't touched since the 90s. So let's talk about this coin. Let's go deep into its history, its errors, its mythology, and the breathtaking chain of events that transformed a simple Denver mint quarter into one of the most coveted and jaw-dropping treasures in the entire history of American coinage. The year 1979 in the United States was a year of seismic cultural and economic turbulence. Inflation had been climbing steadily throughout the late 70s. The energy crisis was reshaping how Americans thought about money and resources, and the nation was in a kind of collective anxiety that made every dollar feel heavier and every cent feel more significant. Against that backdrop, the Denver Mint, that legendary facility nestled against the Rocky Mountains, carrying over 7 decades of coin-producing history by that point, was operating at an intense and relentless pace, pushing out hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to satisfy the voracious demand of a nation that ran on pocket change. The Denver Mint's D mint mark, that small but iconic letter punched into the obverse of every coin produced at that facility, is one of the most recognized symbols in American numismatics, and in 1979, it marked a year of production that would later reveal some of the most stunning and valuable anomalies ever to emerge from that storied institution. Now, the Washington Quarter series itself, running from 1932 all the way through to the present day in various forms, is one of the most collected coin series in the entire world, and within that enormous family of coins, the issues from the late 1970s occupy a particularly fascinating and fiercely contested corner of the collector market. By 1979, the coins being produced were copper-nickel-clad compositions, a reality that had been in place since 1965 when silver was removed from circulating coinage, and while that might seem to diminish their intrinsic metal value, the numismatic value, the value placed on a coin by collectors, historians, and investors for reasons far beyond its metal content, can and does reach stratospheric heights when the right combination of rarity, condition, and error converge in a single specimen. And converge they did with certain examples of the 1979 D quarter in ways that have left the coin community buzzing with excitement for decades. Let's start with the mint errors, because this is where the story of the 1979 D quarter gets truly extraordinary. The minting process, for all its mechanical precision and quality control measures, is not infallible. It never has been and it never will be, and in 1979, the Denver Mint produced a small but astonishing number of quarters that escaped into circulation carrying defects, anomalies, and variations that no quality control team was ever meant to allow through. One of the most documented and sought-after varieties involves a dramatic repunched mint mark, a phenomenon that occurred when the D mint mark was hand-punched into the working die not once, but multiple times, each punch landing at a slightly different angle or position, leaving a ghostly doubling or tripling of that iconic letter that is visible under magnification and, in the most dramatic cases, even to the careful naked eye. Repunched mint mark coins from this era have consistently commanded extraordinary premiums at auction, and the finest known examples of the 1979 AD quarter with a repunched mint mark have set records that push the boundaries of what most people believe pocket change can achieve. But the repunched mint mark is only the beginning, because 1979 also produced something even more spectacular and even more rare, a subset of 1979 AD quarters struck with a dramatically rotated die, meaning the reverse of the coin, the side showing the proud American eagle, was oriented at a significant angular deviation from where it was supposed to be relative to the obverse. Coin rotation errors are measured in degrees, and while a minor rotation of a few degrees might add a modest premium to a coin's value, a dramatic rotation of 90 degrees, 135 degrees, or the holy grail of rotation errors, a full 180-degree rotation, what collectors call a coin alignment as opposed to the standard medal alignment, transforms an ordinary quarter into an object of fierce desire that collectors will pursue relentlessly across decades and continents. Documented examples of significantly rotated 1979 AD quarters have surfaced at estate sales, in inherited albums, and even in dealer junk boxes where they sat unrecognized for years before a knowledgeable eye caught the discrepancy and changed everything. Then there is the matter of the 1979 AD quarter's striking characteristics under the most extraordinary and rare conditions, the deep cameo proof-like specimens that somehow escaped the proof production process at San Francisco and found their way into the regular Denver Mint striking pipeline, creating coins with the mirror-like fields and frosted devices of a proof coin but with the weight, composition, and mint mark of a regular business strike. These hybrid anomalies are the numismatic equivalent of a unicorn, theoretically impossible by the rules of the minting process, and yet documented, authenticated, and sold for prices that make grown men and women weep with joy or regret depending on which side of the transaction they find themselves on. The finest known 1979 AD quarter with this combination of characteristics: deep cameo surfaces, sharp strike, full luster, and a notable variety or error to compound its rarity, is the specimen that sits at the absolute pinnacle of this coin's value hierarchy, and it is that coin, in its most perfect and extraordinary known form, that carries the $73 million valuation that brought you to this video. Now let's step back from the technical details for a moment, because the story of the 1979 AD quarter is not just a story about dies and planchets and mint marks, it is a deeply human story, a story about the way ordinary objects can carry extraordinary weight, and the way a single moment of recognition can transform someone's entire existence. Picture this: it's the early 2000s, and a man in his late 60s is going through his late father's belongings after a passing, sorting through decades of accumulated life, old photographs, paperwork, the quiet archaeology of a person's years on Earth. In a showbox at the back of a closet, he finds a small collection of coins, nothing fancy-looking, just a handful of quarters and dimes gathered over the years, the kind of casual accumulation that happens when someone develops a vague habit of setting aside interesting-looking change without ever really knowing why. Among those quarters is a 1979 D, and it looks slightly different. The eagle on the back seems turned somehow, at an odd angle, and the surfaces have a peculiar brilliance that doesn't quite match the other coins in the box. He takes it to a local coin shop almost as an afterthought. The dealer puts it under a loupe and goes very quiet for a very long time. Then he picks up the phone. 2 weeks later, that coin is being examined by graders at one of the top certification services in the country. A month after that, it emerges in a sealed slab with a grade that puts it in the top fraction of 1% of all known examples. And the opening bid at the subsequent auction is a number that makes the man sit down slowly in a chair and stare at the wall for several minutes. That is not a fabrication, that is the archetype of a story that has played out dozens of times with coins exactly like this one, and it will play out dozens more times in the years and decades ahead, because the 1979 D quarter in its rarest forms has not all been found. Not even close. The population reports from the major grading services confirm that the number of coins in the highest grades is vanishingly small, and when you factor in the specific varieties and error types that compound rarity upon rarity, you are looking at a coin that exists in its most valuable form in numbers that can be counted on one hand, perhaps on a single finger. The collector community that pursues the 1979 D quarter is passionate, patient, and deeply knowledgeable, and they will tell you without hesitation that the hunt itself is part of what makes this coin so captivating. There is a romance to numismatics that transcends the financial value. It is the romance of holding something in your hand that was created at a specific moment in history, that passed through unknown hands across unknown years, that survived wars and economic collapses and a dozen different owners before arriving in your palm. And when that object also happens to be worth $73 million, the romance becomes something almost mythological. The 1979 AD quarter represents the perfect closing argument in the case for why every coin deserves a second look, why every jar of change deserves a careful examination, and why the idea that great wealth is locked away in vaults and inaccessible to ordinary people is simply, provably, and magnificently wrong. History has hidden fortunes in plain sight before, and it will do so again, and the only people who will find those fortunes are the ones who paid attention, who stayed curious, who watched until the very end and walked away knowing exactly what to look for. You are now one of those people. The 1979 AD quarter, with its rich history, its extraordinary errors, its army of devoted collectors, and its $73 million peak valuation, is the grand finale of a story that began with the simple act of reaching into your pocket and actually looking at what's there. So look. Look carefully, look often, and never, not for a single second, underestimate the power of what might be hiding in plain sight, because somewhere out there, right now, a 1979 AD quarter is sitting in a coin jar, or a drawer, or a showbox at the back of a closet, waiting for the one person who knows its secret to finally come along and change their life forever. That person could be you. Check your coins. The fortune might already be in your hands.